shy billionaire hires his maid for his sister's wedding. He never expected what happened after. He's a billionaire who has never fallen in love until one choice changes everything. She was just his maid. But one wedding night, sparks fly and nothing will ever be the same. Watch what happens when two worlds collide. The mansion was too quiet for how big it was. The sound of Alexander Hartley's footsteps followed him everywhere, down marble hallways, through rooms filled with shiny antiques and furniture no one ever used. The Hartley estate had always been a symbol of power and family history, but for Alex it was mostly an empty shell, a big reminder of what he had and what he was missing. It had been a year since his father died. The business had fully passed to his hands, the real estate, the properties across Europe, the investments his father had built piece by piece. On paper, Alexander Hartley was the kind of man people looked up to, handsome, wealthy, smart, and disciplined. But behind that perfection was a man who couldn't hold a conversation longer than 2 minutes unless it was about numbers or business. Every time his mother and sister tried to introduce him to the right woman, it ended badly. He'd sit across dinner tables from women who talked easily about art or travel, while he'd stare into his drink, trying to find the right words. The few times he tried to compliment them, it came out awkward and robotic. By the end of the evening, there would be polite smiles, forced laughter, and that look, pity. He wasn't rude, just absent. Conversations slid off him like rain on glass. Sometimes even he wondered if something was wrong with him. At night, he'd return to his penthouse overlooking London, pour himself a glass of scotch, and stare at the city lights. He'd watch couples walking along the Thames below, laughing, holding hands. And he'd feel a quiet ache in his chest he could never quite name. And so the days repeated. Home, office, and back. Quiet meals, polite greetings from staff. Silence. Charlotte's laughter filled the family dining room that Sunday afternoon. She was glowing, wedding excitement shining off her like sunlight. "So Alex, please don't tell me you'll be showing up to my wedding alone again. You'll scare my guests away with your silence." Alex looked up from his plate, one eyebrow raised. "I'm not that bad." "Oh, sweetheart, you are," Margaret teased lovingly from across the table. His mother, elegant as ever in a cream blouse and pearls, smiled knowingly. "Last Christmas, you barely spoke 5 words to poor Evelyn Turner." "I didn't have much to say," Alex muttered. Charlotte leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then find someone worth talking to. I mean it. You are not walking into my wedding without a date. It's my big day, Alex. You'll ruin the balance of the photos." Margaret joined in, pretending to scold him. "If you show up without a date, you might as well stay home." Laughter filled the table, light teasing, but Alex only smiled faintly. He knew they meant well, but their words stayed in his head long after lunch ended. As he drove home that night, Charlotte's voice played in his head. "You'll ruin the photos." He wasn't offended. He just didn't know who he could possibly bring. Ethan had known Alex since college, the only man who could ever make him laugh freely. They met for drinks at a quiet rooftop bar overlooking Piccadilly, where Ethan noticed his friend's distracted look. "So, Charlotte's wedding coming up. You bringing anyone, or should I send you a date from one of those agencies?" Alex gave him a sharp look. "Agencies? You know those fake date services? You hire someone to pretend to be your girlfriend for an event." Ethan chuckled at Alex's horrified face. "Relax, I'm joking. Mostly." Alex's frown deepened, but his silence made Ethan pause. "Oh God, you're actually thinking about it." "I'm not," Alex said quickly, though his voice lacked conviction. "I just don't want another awkward dinner or 1,000 questions from my mother." Ethan shrugged. "Then bring someone unexpected, someone who won't care about your money or last name. You just need warmth beside you, mate. Someone who makes you human for a day." The idea embarrassed him, the thought of paying a stranger to play pretend. Yet, as the night wore on and the city lights flickered below, a quiet thought stayed in his mind. Maybe Ethan wasn't totally wrong. Friday evening. The air was cool and damp after rain. Alex stepped through the front doors of his mansion, loosening his tie. The faint smell of lemon polish greeted him. Lydia is doing as always. She appeared from the hallway, wiping her hands on a folded towel, her expression gentle and professional. "Welcome back, sir," her American accent soft and warm. He gave a small nod. Usually that would be the end of it. He'd go upstairs and she'd finish her work quietly. But tonight, something made him pause. The light from the chandelier caught her skin, deep brown, glowing. Her curls were tied in a loose bun, a few strands framing her face. She wasn't wearing makeup, just simplicity, natural, graceful, alive. For a moment, he simply looked at her. "Sir?" she asked, her brow slightly raised. He cleared his throat, heart beating with unexpected nerves. "Lydia, may I ask you something a bit unusual?" Her lips twitched with curiosity. "Unusual how?" "My sister's wedding is in 2 weeks. She insists I bring someone, and I was wondering if you might come with me." She blinked. "You mean as my date?" He finished quickly, awkwardly. "Just for the day, only because my family, they—" He trailed off, realizing how ridiculous he sounded. Lydia stared at him for a long moment, then smiled in disbelief. "You're serious?" "I am," he said, his voice steady now. "I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. I'll handle everything, travel, dress, hotel. I just need someone I can actually stand being around." Her laugh was soft and real. "That's the most unusual compliment I've ever received, sir." He managed a small smile. "Is that a yes?" After a long pause, she sighed lightly. "All right, if it'll help you survive your sister's wedding, I'll do it." Over the next few days, Lydia found herself second-guessing her decision. What would people think? A housemaid pretending to be the billionaire's girlfriend. But Alex was kind, almost gentle when he spoke about it again. He said it wasn't about image or gossip, only about surviving the day peacefully. "My family just wants to see me with someone," he said, looking almost apologetic. "I promise it's only for show." Lydia smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, Mr. Hartley, I understand." He looked relieved. "And please, while we're there, call me Alex." Something about hearing his name without "sir" made him feel human again. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and golden. Lydia stood before the mirror in the guest suite, transformed. The gown Alex had chosen, the soft champagne color that shimmered gently under the light, hugged her figure perfectly. Her hair was styled in elegant curls, cascading down her shoulders. A makeup artist had enhanced her features just enough to highlight her natural beauty. When she came down the stairs, Alex was waiting by the car, adjusting his cufflinks. The moment he saw her, his breath caught. He'd seen beauty before, at galas and in photographs, but never like this. Lydia wasn't trying to impress, she simply was. "You look," he started, then stopped, realizing words failed him. She smiled shyly. "Presentable enough for a fake girlfriend?" His lips curved into a rare smile. "More than enough." The countryside estate was alive with laughter, music, and blooming flowers. As Alex and Lydia stepped out of the car, heads turned. "Is that Alex?" someone whispered. "And with a date?" Margaret froze for half a second. Then her eyes lit up. "Oh my goodness!" Charlotte, glowing in her bridal gown, squealed when she saw them. "You actually brought someone!" Lydia felt dozens of eyes on her, but Alex gently placed his hand at her back, a silent reassurance. "Everyone, this is Lydia." To everyone's surprise, Lydia charmed the crowd easily. Her warmth won over even the most doubtful guests. Margaret's approval came quickly. A warm hug, real compliments, and laughter that filled the air. Alex stayed close to her side all evening, finding comfort in her presence. Every time he looked at her, something in his chest shifted. Later in the evening, as Alex stepped away to take a call, Margaret leaned toward Lydia. Her smile gentle but knowing. "My dear, I know you're only helping him, but you have no idea how grateful I am. He's been so alone for so long. If there's even a small chance you could make him truly happy, I'd be thankful beyond words." Lydia's eyes widened slightly, caught off guard. "Oh, Mrs. Hartley, it's not like that. I'm just—" "I know, but maybe someday it could be." Lydia smiled politely, unsure what to say. She nodded, thinking the older woman was only being kind. She couldn't possibly know how those words would echo later. The reception lights glowed golden as music filled the air. Couples swayed across the floor, laughter mixing with the melody. Charlotte, with a playful grin, pulled her brother toward the dance floor. "Go on, Alex. You can't hide all night." To everyone's surprise, Alex turned to Lydia and held out his hand. "May I?" Her smile trembled slightly. "You may." As they began to dance, something quiet and magical happened. The rhythm was slow, the world around them fading to a blur. Alex wasn't a great dancer, stiff at first, but Lydia's gentle confidence guided him. Their eyes met, his steady, hers curious, and for the first time, Alex felt something spark inside him, something he couldn't name but didn't want to lose. When the song ended, the guests clapped, cheering for the rare sight of the billionaire smiling. Hours later, the mansion was silent again. Lydia slipped off her heels, removed the earrings, and carefully folded the gown he'd given her. Her reflection in the mirror felt like a dream, a night borrowed from a life that wasn't hers. Meanwhile, Alex lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. He could still smell her perfume, hear her laugh, see the kindness in her eyes. He turned to the window, watching the city lights blink softly in the distance. For the first time in years, the silence around him didn't feel empty. It felt full of questions he'd never dared to ask. And somewhere deep inside, Alexander Hartley realized that the woman who'd only been meant to pretend might have awakened something dangerously real. The Monday after Charlotte's wedding started grey and quiet, but something in the Hartley mansion had shifted, something Lydia couldn't name. Normally, after the breakfast dishes were cleaned and the day's chores lined up in her planner, she barely saw her employer again until evening. Alexander Hartley liked routine, silence, and space. He worked in his glass-walled office, coming out only for tea or brief instructions, but now he lingered. Lydia noticed at first when he came down earlier than usual, sleeves rolled, hair slightly messy, like he hadn't slept much. He stood by the kitchen doorway as she made his coffee. "Good morning," he said. She blinked, surprised. "Good morning, sir." His gaze flicked to her briefly, then away. "It's Alex. You can call me Alex." The words felt strange in the air, almost delicate. She smiled faintly, unsure if it was truly an invitation or just politeness. As the days passed, those moments multiplied. He asked how her day was going. He offered to make her tea, clumsy and awkward, spilling half the sugar. He'd walk through the kitchen just to comment on the weather. By Friday, Lydia found herself smiling before he entered the room. The house, once cold and huge, began to hum softly with something she couldn't define. Not romance yet, but warmth. And for Alexander, that warmth was terrifyingly addictive. He found excuses to pass her in the hallway. When she laughed at one of his self-deprecating remarks, it was like sunlight breaking through years of fog. He didn't understand it, how someone so simple, so real, could make him feel seen in a way that money never had. A week later, Margaret Hartley arrived unannounced, as she often did. Alex was in the living room, laptop open, when his mother swept in, tall, elegant, and still glowing with the quiet authority of a woman who had once run half the company beside her late husband. "My goodness, you're home early," she said with an approving smile. "And you look well." Alex chuckled nervously. "Do I?" "Yes, less like a ghost." She brushed invisible lint from his shoulder. "I think that wedding did you some good." Lydia entered then, carrying a tray of tea and biscuits. When Margaret saw her, something softened in her face. Recognition, perhaps even quiet hope. "Lydia, dear," she greeted warmly. "So lovely to see you again." Lydia smiled. "It's good to see you too, Ma'am." They had polite conversation, but Margaret was watching closely. Not just Lydia, but the way Alex's eyes followed her movements, the faint lift in his voice when she spoke. When Lydia stepped out of the room, Margaret turned to her son with a knowing smile. "She's a wonderful woman," she said. Alex tried to deflect. "She's kind and efficient." "Efficient?" Margaret laughed softly. "Darling, that's not the word for how you look at her." He sighed, closing his laptop. "Mom." Margaret leaned down and kissed his cheek. "I'm not saying anything. Just keep smiling, will you? Your father would have loved to see you this alive again." And with that, she left him standing there, conflicted, curious, and more aware than ever that Lydia was slowly becoming the brightest part of his home. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Lydia had just finished making fresh coffee when Alex walked in, holding a stack of papers. The house was unusually peaceful, sunlight coming through the tall windows. She turned too quickly, and her elbow knocked the pot. In a blink, coffee splashed across his papers, rich brown stains spreading over crisp white pages. "Oh no, sir, I'm so sorry," she gasped, rushing for a towel. "I wasn't looking." He blinked at the dripping papers, then at her flustered expression, cheeks flushed, curls falling from her bun, and then, to her complete shock, he laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a real, unguarded laugh, deep and real, echoing off the marble. Lydia froze, towel in hand. "You're laughing?" He tried to catch his breath. "It's just the board reports. I hated them anyway." She let out a nervous laugh too, relief flooding her chest. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked like someone her own age. Boyish, free, alive. Something inside her fluttered. He noticed it too, that spark between apology and laughter. And though neither said a word, the air seemed to hum quietly between them. The rain started in the late afternoon, gentle at first, then hard. The storm rolled in with thunder and the smell of wet earth. Lydia was in the kitchen, drying dishes, when the lights flickered. Alex appeared, sleeves rolled up, holding a candle. "Power's out. Looks like we're trapped," she said, smiling faintly. He joined her at the counter, both of them lit by warm candlelight. The air was heavy with rain, but inside the world felt close, sealed off. They sat by the window with tea, watching droplets race down the glass. For the first time, conversation flowed easily, about her family in Birmingham, her dream of studying hospitality management, his late father, the loneliness that followed him despite wealth. "People always think money fills the silence," Alex said softly, "but it just makes it echo louder." Lydia looked at him and saw not a billionaire, but a man who'd never been truly known. When lightning flashed, the house shook. She flinched on instinct. He reached out, fingers brushing hers. Neither pulled away. His touch was hesitant, gentle, like a man learning a new language. And in that silence, something fragile but real was born. Charlotte arrived 2 days later, glowing from her honeymoon. She swept into the mansion with laughter and the scent of roses, her husband following behind. "Big brother," she exclaimed, hugging Alex. "Look at you, smiling already. Married life looks good on you." He rolled his eyes. "I'm not married." "Not yet," she teased, eyes glinting. Then she spotted Lydia arranging flowers near the dining table. "Ah, the mystery woman from the wedding." Lydia straightened, cheeks warming. "Mrs. Holloway, congratulations." Charlotte grinned. "Please call me Charlotte, and thank you. You were the talk of the wedding. You know, everyone adored you." Lydia laughed nervously. "That's very kind." Charlotte glanced between them, mischief dancing in her gaze. "Finally, someone who makes him smile." Alex blushed, pretending to busy himself with a vase. Lydia ducked her head, laughter bubbling despite herself. The visit was brief, but the teasing stayed long after they'd gone, an echo that made Alex's heart race every time he remembered her words. It was nearly midnight when Lydia heard it, soft notes drifting through the mansion like a secret. Curious, she followed the sound to the sitting room and found Alex seated at the grand piano, head bowed, fingers moving carefully across the keys. He didn't see her at first. The melody was low, tender, a lullaby for memories he rarely let surface. "That's beautiful," she whispered. He turned, startled. "I didn't know anyone was awake." "I couldn't sleep," she said, stepping closer. "You play wonderfully." He smiled shyly. "It was my father's. He used to play when I was a child." She hesitated. "May I sit?" He nodded. She sat beside him, and for a moment their shoulders brushed, the faintest contact, but it sent warmth through both of them. They played together quietly, his fingers on melody, hers following softly on harmony. The room filled with something wordless, something ancient and tender. When the last note faded, silence stayed, heavy, electric. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. By the end of the month, Lydia couldn't ignore it anymore. The late-night talks, the quiet laughter, the stolen glances. She told herself it was wrong. He was her employer. Their worlds were too far apart. So one evening after dinner, she practiced her words, stood by the study door, and knocked softly. Alex looked up from his desk. "Lydia." She took a breath. "I wanted to say, I think it's time I moved on. You've been kind, but—" He stood so suddenly that his chair scraped the floor. "Don't go." The words were low but urgent. She blinked, startled. "Sir." He stepped closer, eyes uncertain but sincere. "The house feels empty without you." For a heartbeat, silence filled the space between them, thick with emotion they both feared to name. She looked at him, saw the truth in his eyes, and her breath caught. But she couldn't speak. Not yet. That night, Lydia lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her heart wouldn't stop racing. In the room below, Alex sat at his piano again, fingers brushing the same few notes he'd played beside her. Each of them thought about the other, the laughter, the touch, the storm, the near confession. Neither knew where this was heading, but both knew that something that couldn't be undone had begun. The billionaire who'd never known love had found a reason to stay awake at night, and the maid, who'd promised to keep her heart safe, was now learning what it meant to feel seen. The mansion that once echoed with silence now hummed softly with the sound of something new, possibility. The days after Lydia almost quit felt heavier than any storm. The mansion, once filled with new warmth, had grown quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't empty. It was charged, humming with everything unspoken between them. Lydia moved through her work with her usual grace, but every time she passed Alex in the hallway, her breath caught. She felt his gaze stay, soft but searching, as if he were always on the edge of saying something and couldn't. He found himself doing things he'd never done before, walking to the kitchen just to refill his water, standing by the window when he knew she'd be outside hanging laundry, inventing reasons to call her name. They spoke politely, too politely. "Good morning, Lydia." "Good morning, sir." And that was it. Yet beneath the calm, their emotions tangled and deepened. Every glance was a story, every silence a confession neither dared to voice. At night, Alex replayed her laughter in his head, her gentle voice, the way she touched the rose petals in the garden, as though the world itself deserved tenderness. He didn't know what to do with the ache inside him, this quiet, constant wanting that both thrilled and terrified him. And Lydia, in her small upstairs room, tried to remind herself that this could never be real. He was a billionaire, her employer, her world's opposite. But still, her heart betrayed her every time she saw him smile. They were two people bound by silence, each afraid that speaking might break whatever fragile magic had grown between them. Margaret Hartley arrived on a breezy Wednesday afternoon, bringing with her the faint scent of roses and an air of knowing calm. Lydia welcomed her warmly as always and poured tea in the sitting room. Margaret's eyes, sharp yet kind, noticed the tension right away, the way Lydia avoided Alex's gaze, the faint hesitation in his voice whenever she entered the room. They all sat together for a polite chat about business and the upcoming charity dinner, but beneath the surface, something else pulsed, something Margaret recognized easily. When Lydia excused herself to get more tea, Margaret turned to her son. "Alex," she said softly, "do you know what I see?" He looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "You. The way you look at her. You're your father's son, cautious to a fault. He almost lost me once because he couldn't admit what he felt." He frowned slightly, glancing toward the door Lydia had just passed through. "I don't know if she feels the same," he murmured. Margaret reached across the table, her touch gentle but firm. "You'll never know if you keep hiding behind your quietness. Don't lose love by overthinking it, Alex. It doesn't come twice for everyone." Her words landed like truth, spoken from experience, not pressure, not expectation, but love. Alex sat still long after she left, his heart pounding with realization. Maybe he'd spent his whole life avoiding risk, avoiding emotion. But with Lydia, silence hurt more than fear ever could. The next afternoon, sunlight stretched golden across the garden. The air smelled of roses, freshly watered earth, and spring. Lydia knelt among the flower beds, trimming stems with practiced care. She loved the garden. It was where she felt free, surrounded by life and colour. She didn't notice Alex at first, watching her from the terrace, his heart clenched at the sight. The way she hummed softly under her breath, her curls glowing in the light, the peace that came so naturally to her. Finally, he walked toward her, unsure of what he'd say. "Those roses look healthier," he said awkwardly, crouching beside her. Lydia glanced up, smiling faintly. "They just needed pruning. Some things bloom better after you cut away the old parts." He nodded, unsure whether she knew how perfectly those words described him. They worked side by side for a while, their hands brushing over thorns and petals. The silence between them felt different this time, not heavy, but waiting. When his fingers grazed hers over a rose stem, he didn't pull away. Neither did she. He looked at her, eyes open, voice trembling, but steady. "Lydia, I've never known how to feel. Not really. My life has always been about numbers, meetings, expectations. I never learned what it meant to care about someone until you." She froze, heart racing, eyes locked on his. "I don't expect you to feel the same," he continued, voice low, almost breaking. "But when you're here, everything feels right. The house, my life, It all makes sense when you're in it. Lydia's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but her words failed. The truth was simple and terrifying. She'd fallen too. The garden around them seemed to fade into stillness. A soft breeze brushed between them as if nature itself held its breath. She turned to him slowly, uncertainty in her eyes. "Alex, we come from such different worlds. You don't need to say this." He stepped closer. "I do, because it's the only thing that's ever felt honest." Her resistance melted under the quiet honesty in his voice. There was no grand speech, no sweeping music, only the gentle truth between two hearts finally brave enough to meet. He reached up, brushing a loose curl from her face. His touch was hesitant, gentle, the way someone might touch sunlight for the first time. "Tell me if this is wrong," he whispered. "It's not," she said softly. And then he kissed her, slowly, tenderly, as if afraid to break the moment. It wasn't a kiss of passion or rush. It was discovery, the taste of new beginnings, the meeting of two souls who had lived too long in silence. When they pulled apart, Lydia's eyes glistened. Alex's hand stayed on her cheek. "I've never done that before," he said quietly, almost shyly. She smiled, tears threatening. "Then I'm honored." The garden, washed in sunlight and petals, seemed to bloom brighter around them, the world itself bearing witness to their first moment of truth. When Margaret and Charlotte heard of their growing closeness, the response wasn't shock or gossip, it was joy. Margaret called first, her voice warm through the phone. "I'm so happy for you, darling, truly. Lydia is wonderful. She brings out the best in you." Charlotte visited soon after, teasing as always. "I knew it from the wedding, the way you looked at her. Oh, you were gone from the start." Lydia blushed at every compliment, humbled by their kindness. She had feared judgment, whispers, maybe even quiet disapproval. But instead, there was nothing but acceptance. "Love isn't about matching pedigrees," Margaret told her over tea one afternoon. "It's about finding peace in someone's presence. You've given my son that peace." Tears pricked Lydia's eyes. "Thank you, ma'am." "No, dear," Margaret said with a smile. "Thank you." The house that had once echoed with distance was now filled with laughter, shared breakfast, light teasing, and the comfort of belonging. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm, a beautiful one. Lydia still helped around the house, but she was no longer the maid. She was Lydia, Alex's partner, his confidant, his love. He took her to business dinners, always introducing her, proudly as someone very important to me. He invited her on short trips, exploring the English countryside hand in hand. Mornings began with him making her coffee, badly but with effort, and her laughter echoing through the quiet rooms. Evenings ended with music, sometimes the piano, sometimes silence, both equally comfortable. Alex had changed, and everyone noticed. His staff said he smiled more. His board said he listened better. But only Lydia knew the truth. He hadn't changed for the world. He'd changed because for the first time he wanted to be truly known. They still had differences, moments of shyness, awkwardness, but every flaw, every silence only deepened their bond. Love had made the mansion a home. It was a cold autumn evening when Alex asked Lydia to dinner at a small candlelit restaurant tucked away on a quiet London street. She wore a simple cream dress, her hair in soft curls. He couldn't stop looking at her, the woman who had unknowingly rewritten his life. They talked about everything, their favorite books, the upcoming holidays, how the roses had survived the frost. The waiter brought dessert, but neither touched it. Alex's hand trembled slightly as he reached across the table. "Lydia," he said softly, "do you remember the day I asked you to pretend to be my date?" She smiled, amused. "How could I forget?" He nodded, eyes shining. That day began as a lie. I only wanted to stop my family from teasing me, but that one lie gave me the truth of my life. Lydia's breath caught. He stood then, quietly pulling a small box from his jacket. The restaurant fell away into silence. Everything I've ever built, all the walls, all the silence, they meant nothing until you walked into my world. You showed me how to feel, how to live. He knelt. Lydia, will you marry me? Her hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Yes, she whispered, then louder, laughing through tears. Yes, Alex. He slid the ring on her finger, elegant, simple, just like their love. Around them, the restaurant clapped softly, but he only saw her. Their kiss was gentle, full of promise, the kind that carried forever in its simplicity. The Hartley estate was bathed in golden light as wedding guests filled the grand hall. Margaret stood by the staircase, tears in her eyes, watching her son dance with his bride. Lydia glowed in white silk, radiant and peaceful, her hand resting on Alex's shoulder. His eyes never left hers. The shy billionaire, who had once struggled to speak, now held the woman who had taught him love. Charlotte whispered to her husband, smiling. He finally found his heart. And it was true. There were no rumors, no whispers of scandal, only joy. The guests spoke softly, smiling, because everyone could feel it. This wasn't the story of wealth or luck. It was the story of a man who had everything except love, until a quiet maid taught him how to live again. As music filled the air, Alex leaned close and whispered, "You were the best thing I never planned." Lydia smiled, eyes glistening, "And the truest thing I ever found." They danced slowly, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and forever. And in that moment, beneath the chandelier's glow, Alexander Hartley, the billionaire who once couldn't hold a conversation, finally understood what it meant to love in quiet places. 2 years later, the afternoon sunlight spilled gently through the tall windows of the Hartley family garden, wrapping everything in gold. Balloons in soft shades of ivory and sky blue floated lazily above the tables. Laughter danced in the air, mixing with the distant strumming of a guitar and the sound of little feet on the grass. It was a celebration, close, warm, and filled with love. Their son, Jaden Hartley, had just turned 1. Alex stood near the table, holding the boy in his arms. Jaden's small fingers tugged at his father's tie, drooling happily as he babbled nonsense. Alex couldn't help laughing, a deep, real laugh that seemed to come from somewhere new, somewhere soft. "Careful, little man," he said with pretend sternness. "That tie costs more than your entire wardrobe." From behind him, Lydia chuckled, setting down a tray of cupcakes. "And yet, I'm sure he'll win that battle too," she teased, brushing her hands on her apron before coming to stand beside them. She still looked every bit like herself, warm brown skin glowing in the light, curls tied back loosely, her wedding ring glinting as she reached for her son. Alex handed Jaden over carefully, his gaze staying on her face like it always did. "You've outdone yourself again," he said softly, glancing at the setup, the garden blooming, the food laid out perfectly, and the way everyone looked completely at peace. Lydia smiled, rocking Jaden gently. "It wasn't just me. Your mother supervised the cake, and Charlotte insisted on the decorations." At that, Margaret Hartley, dignified as ever in her pale blue dress, turned from where she stood near the patio. "Supervised?" she repeated with a laugh. "I baked that cake myself. Don't you dare take that away from me." Lydia grinned. "Yes, ma'am. You're the true queen of this event." Margaret chuckled, walking over and kissing her grandson's forehead. "And he knows it, don't you, my darling boy?" she cooed. Jaden squealed in response, smacking his tiny palms together in delight. "Charlotte," Lydia called. "He's awake now. Come say hi before he decides to nap again." From the far side of the garden, Charlotte appeared, her 2-year-old daughter Amelia toddling along beside her. Amelia was clutching a stuffed bunny, her curls bouncing as she giggled her way toward her aunt and cousin. "Auntie Lydia!" she cried, holding her arms out. Lydia knelt down with Jaden in her lap. "Hello, sweetheart. Be gentle with your cousin, okay?" Amelia nodded seriously, then immediately poked Jaden's nose, bursting into laughter when he giggled. The adults couldn't help laughing too. The moment was pure, golden, simple, the kind of joy that fills the air without needing anything more. Alex stood back for a moment, watching the 3 women, his wife, his mother, and his sister, all together in one picture. His chest filled with quiet pride and a depth of peace he never thought he'd know. There was a time when his house was silent, when even laughter echoed like an intruder. Now the walls hummed with warmth, Lydia's soft humming in the mornings, Jaden's giggles, Margaret's gentle advice, Charlotte's teasing. It was life, real and complete. He felt a tug at his hand. It was Lydia, looking up at him with that same look she'd worn the day he'd proposed, eyes filled with love and quiet gratitude. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked softly. He shook his head, smiling. "Just this. All of this. It still feels like I'm dreaming." Lydia laughed quietly. "Then let's never wake up." They stood side by side, watching their families mingle, Margaret chatting with Charlotte's husband, Amelia chasing butterflies across the garden, and Jaden gnawing on the edge of a cupcake with proud determination. As the evening deepened and the sky blushed into soft orange and pink, Alex raised his glass. "To family," he said, voice strong but tender. "To the unexpected, and to love that finds us even when we've stopped looking." Margaret smiled through misty eyes. Charlotte clinked her glass against his. Lydia squeezed his hand, whispering, "To forever." And laughter echoed once more through the garden. Jaden squealed from his high chair, banging his little fist on the tray as if to join the toast. Everyone burst into laughter. The camera of life would have paused right there, a picture of home, of love in its simplest form. The once lonely billionaire now had everything he never knew he needed. A wife who taught him to feel, a family that grounded him, and a son whose smile was proof that even the coldest hearts could bloom again. And as twilight fell over the Hartley estate, Lydia leaned her head on Alex's shoulder and whispered, "Happy first birthday to our little miracle." Alex smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "And to the woman who made everything worth living for." The garden lights flickered softly as their laughter joined the night, warm, endless, and filled with love. Thank you for being part of this story. Your love and support mean more than words.